This is Advent season. And Advent is something which is not celebrated in as many churches as it used to be. But it's still something around the world which many churches do celebrate. But it didn't start off as a celebration leading up to Christmas. It started off as a celebration leading up to the Feast of Epiphany in January. The first mention of this was by a bishop preceptuous of Tours in the 4th century. This was the beginning of the celebration, and it was meant to be a celebration from the Feast of St. Martin's on November 11th to Epiphany. And it was meant to be equivalent to the Lent before Easter. It was not called Advent, or actually made mention of, until the Council of Tours in 267. In fact, the Eastern Church still calls it a nativity fast, leading up to Christmas and Epiphany. And the 4 symbols were initially for Epiphany, for the visit of the Magi, for the baptism of John, and then the first miracle at Cana. It really had nothing to do with the birth of Christ. It was not until the Romans and Roman Christians came into being in the 6th century that it became known as Advent, from the Roman Adventus. And that was a translation from the Greek parousia, which really refers to the second coming of Christ, not the first. It has evolved over the years, and in the Middle Ages became known as something to celebrate the first birth of Christ. The Advent wreath was not brought into being until the 1800s, late 1800s, and then it consisted of 20 red candles and 4 white ones. And it has evolved now to have 4 candles with a 5th white one. And the meanings of these candles change depending upon which source you look at. But the most common one seems to be this. The first candle represents hope and is called the prophet's candle. It says in 1 Peter 3:16 to always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is within you. And hope in the New Testament does not mean just wishful thinking for something. It refers to some certainty which will appear at an unknown time. Hope. The second candle has been called by a number of names, but the most common is called faith, or the Bethlehem candle. It says in Hebrews that by faith we know God. Without faith you cannot please God. Faith. The third candle is called the shepherd's candle, or the candle of joy. Christ said he came so that our joy might be full. The 4th candle was called the angel's candle, representing peace. Christ said, "My peace I leave with you." And then the 5th candle is white, which is the Christ candle, representing light and purity. It's interesting that when you see the arrangement of these candles, you see the Christ candle in the center of the other 4. And if we would look at that arrangement and understand that if Christ is the center of our lives, then we will have the hope, and the faith, and the joy and the peace that Christ brings. Advent is something which is not really celebrated as much, but perhaps we should. Because the most important thing today, the thing which seems to be lacking individually and worldwide, is peace. John 14:27 says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world gives it to you, but I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, nor let it be afraid." Peace. John 16:33 says, "These things I have spoken unto you, that you might have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world." The four candles of Advent are something that we need to consider, because without them and the Christ candle, without Christ, we just have another harried, frenetic, costly holiday. But with Christ, we can have the joy, the hope, the peace that Christmas can actually bring. Amen. So as we come into Christmas, and this is the Advent season, those are just a few little things to think about.